Hey, this is Nicole Tallman from Brooklyn Letters, and I'm here again today with another one of our very talented staff members. Today we had Theo, who is a speech language pathologist. Hi, Theo. How are you?
Hi, Nicole. I'm doing well. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Doing well over here. I would like for you, Theo, to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do,
Okay.
how long you've been doing it, that sort of thing, and then we'll launch into a big hot topic today.
All right. Fantastic. So my name is Theo Winston. I live in Brooklyn. I've been a speech language pathologist for about 5 or 6 years now. I mostly work with little ones, so about 2 to 5 is my general age range. Because of COVID, we've moved all of the sessions online. And so that's what I do now.
Okay, so sitting in your apartment, talking to little kids online all day. Is that what you're doing?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. As much as they'll listen to me. But yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Okay, so what we've been doing a little bit of, Craig, who, as you're aware, is our owner of Brooklyn Letters, and he was participating in a roundtable recently, and they asked several speech language therapists and learning specialists to kind of write in some questions that have been asked of them various times. And so we are doing kind of a series of these videos where I picked 5 or 6 of those hot topics and reached out to you all on staff to see if you would like to address some of those questions. And you were the first person I thought of when this question came up, and I'm going to put my glasses on: how to structure online therapy sessions with parents and children. And I thought about you because with the online setting, a lot of parent calls that I get for children who are young, say 2 and 3 years old, is how can this online virtual teletherapy situation work with someone so young? And you were primarily with the little guys, and so you were who I thought of. So we're going to cover several things, but so talk to me about that. How do we do this with a 2 and a 3-year-old?
Well, I think really a lot more of the onus is going to be on the parents and the caregivers, especially to try to manage some of the more challenging behaviors. But I sort of see that as a benefit as well, because now you're going to have to be a lot more involved in what I'm doing. And even before quarantine, under the best circumstances, I was seeing the children maybe 2 or 3 times a week for 30 minutes. So that's an hour and a half out of a week. There's a lot of weeks and there's a lot of hours in a week, and an hour and a half is not very many as a percentage. So already, even under the best circumstances, I would be relying on the parent to sort of carry over some of the ways that I interact with the child and sort of incorporate that into their daily routine. But now it seems like it's a little bit more seamless, that component of it, the carrying over, because you're just going to be kind of watching me do it anyway. And so, hopefully some of that kind of rubs off on you. I like to try to impress my parents that there's nothing really magical that I do. It's more so a sort of way of interacting rather than anything specifically that I'm doing here. So all the things that I'm doing with the kid are simple enough that you could do with your kid as well. And they're relatively easy to kind of work into your daily routine. What the therapist is there for is to set like the level, like they're at this level, so I kind of want you to be doing these types of activities, to sort of prescribe which types of activities would be the most beneficial at that age or skill level. That's something that the therapist is there for. Actually doing the activities, for example, one thing that I tell my parents to do is, if you see the child watching you, then you describe what you do. Oh, mommy is cutting the apple. Mommy is feeding the dog. These are all things that anybody could do. And people already do them. It's just kind of putting a finer point on them and being aware of what you're doing and trying to do it more, basically. So, like I said, there's nothing really magical about that. It's just that, I would try to show you how I would want that to look, and then sort of give you examples of how to use what I'm trying to teach and sort of broaden the horizons and bring that into more of the activities, daily routines that the kids are doing. So,
Right.
with the kids eating, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say a lot of the kids that you see, you actually will even see them at their school or their preschool. And so
Yep.
the parents aren't even present for the session. So then when the children go home, and the parents don't have the parent coaching through the session that they are now, we're finding, are having, because they really have to be side by side with their child during the session. So there's actually kind of a benefit to the remote therapy.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think like yeah, I'm in contact with I was in contact with the parents who you know I see the kids at the daycare or whatever, or you know if the parent has a job and I'm there with the nanny or whatever. So I would still be talking to the parent, but that's a little bit different than actually seeing what it looks like, and sort of me giving concrete examples of specifics rather than in this general like, oh, you know, you should narrate the children's activities. So if Billy is
right, so you're modeling that so they can see exactly how you do that.
yep, right.
Instead of this is what you should do, they're getting to see this is how you do it.
Right. So it's a manner of showing them how I want them to be interacting with the world around them when they're with their kid, right? And there's nothing. The toys that we play with are, you know, I have like my cards, or I have like my baby. It's nothing too special about them, and these are things that you know most people have in their houses. But you know, if you want to get the maximum language benefit in those moments that you share with your children, then you're going to need, you know, that's where the kind of the coaching comes in. You know, I want them to not change what they're doing completely. I want my parents to just kind of add a little bit of new wrinkles to the activities that are already existing.
Right. And another thing you mentioned before, when we were discussing this, was that the benefit of the camera, you know, especially with little kids. We know that, you know, my grandson calls YouTube MeTube. He wants to watch MeTube. And, you know, he has very certain things. And of course, he'll just sit and watch. But this gives kind of an added component to watching a video that they might be. So talk about that a little bit, because I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as like choose your own adventure on TV, right? Because the kids just, they like to look at screens. Whether we feel good about that or bad about that, that's kind of irrelevant in a sense that that's just kind of the way of the world. But this gives the added, you know, satisfaction of how many TV shows do you watch that you get to tell the person on TV what it is that you want to happen next, right? So, for example, like if I'm playing with my baby, let me get my baby. So I'm playing with my baby. Oh, the baby's hungry. What should we give the baby? Should we give the baby a carrot or the apple? Right, so it's all stuff that is kind of similar to child's TV programming, minus the cool animation and stuff. But now the kid has some agency, and now I'm kind of putting, no pun intended, I'm kind of putting the carrot in front of the kid to be like, now I want you to talk and tell me what you want me to do. And then the more you communicate to me, the more you sort of get this gratification of what I see on the screen is like what I'm telling the person to do. So that's one benefit of the screen. A couple of other benefits that we discussed previously that I think bear repeating is like just the nature of it. You're like already kind of zoomed in on my face. And one of the things I advise my parents, especially with little ones, is when you're talking to your kid, try to have them facing you so they can kind of marry up what your mouth is doing with what they hear. Because language you learn primarily by listening, but you also learn by watching. So I already have an advantage with that because my face is zoomed in. So, you know, that's one thing, the way the mouth moves. Then also some other kind of more nuanced things like nonverbal communication are a lot more powerful on the screen. I feel like, oh, I'm surprised. Oh no, you know, that kind of thing. The kids tend to react really, really positively to that. Another thing that I didn't mention before that I think is really cool is I could use kind of stuff that's off screen, right? So like, for example, if we're doing the flashcards, I could go, oh, beep, beep, vroom, vroom. Oh, what is that? What is that? What is that? And the child would be like, oh, it's a car or something. Or they could just be like, oh, and then here comes the car. Oh, there it goes. Go, 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 car, go. So I could kind of use some like, I don't like theater screen trickery to make it a little bit more interesting too. So like now there's things that they're hearing that they're not seeing, right? So there's a couple of advantages like that.
That's interesting. So one of the things that parents will bring up, or you know, what they'll bring up potential problems that they foresee happening with a remote session. You know, this is going to be a challenge. You know, how am I going to get my 2-year-old to sit for 45 minutes, you know, to an hour or whatever to do this? And of course, first of all, we've already addressed one of those things. Kids sit for 45 minutes to an hour in front of a screen pretty regularly. So the challenge is on your side to keep them engaged. But you had mentioned that, you know what, some of these problems aren't necessarily just limited to screen time, you know, to a remote
Oh,
session.
absolutely.
There are problems
Absolutely.
that are like a one-to-one as well. So address some of those problems so parents can hear, you know, therapy is not easy ever with a 2-year-old.
Right. I mean, yeah, engaging a 2-year-old is always going to be difficult, right? Like I could be in person and have my whole bag of toys and tricks that I can pull out there, and it still has fallen apart. So, you know, just just changing it to screen doesn't really change that, right? They still have their good days and their bad days. I think a little bit more of the control of the session, I feel like I have to give that to the kid a little bit, right? So one example is like if I give them 2 choices to play with in person, I would generally kind of take, like, for example, we play with Mr. Potato Head. Like, I won't let Mr. Potato Head be all done until we got all the pieces on there. But here, I try to give a little bit more control to the kid. So if the kid wants to tell me I'm all done, then I can move on to the next thing. Also, like some of the behavior stuff is just, you know, the person that's going to be sitting there is going to have to help me a little bit with that. But just to your original point, like all these problems that I'm discussing about online therapy, they're present in person too. You know, I've had a lot of sessions kind of cut short or kind of, you know, gone haywire because the kid's having a bad day, and now, you know, they want to watch TV instead of doing therapy, so they cry.
Right.
What am I going to do? Right.
And you had mentioned too that some parents will get, you know, they'll have, you know, maybe they'll try one remote session, or of course this would apply even with an in-person session, but they'll try one session, and let's say that happens to be not a good day for that child, or, you know, a first session does take some adjustment, no matter if that child, you know, is perfectly invested. You know, it's a relationship.
Sure.
There's a lot, but so parents will say, oh, well, we tried it once, and, you know, it isn't going to work. How would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I think we are looking at a little bit longer time frame in terms of our lens, right? So I try, this is maybe my personal philosophy, but I try not to feel too good about a great session. I try not to feel too bad about a bad session, because we're looking at growth over the course of months and weeks and months and maybe even years, you know? So I tend to look more at like how, you know, what's the trajectory rather than whether we had a good session or a bad session. That's something that's maybe unique to teachers and therapists that other people don't benefit from, right? Like if you show up at the doctor and the doctor has an off day and they amputate the wrong arm, like you're never going to get that arm back, right?
That's a tough day.
That's a really tough day. Like I have a tough day, and maybe the next one will be good, maybe the next one will be bad. But I try not to look too much, and I tell this to my parents too, I try not to look too much at one specific session on gauging the performance of either of us. That's one thing. And also another thing, just to your original point, like if the first session could usually could go either way, because on the one hand, it's new, so the kid doesn't know what to expect. And on the other hand, it's new. So the kid's like, oh, this is kind of novel and cool. Like I'm talking to somebody that I've never met before over the computer. So I've typically, for the most part, the people that were kind of on the fence about the sessions were, to be fair, people that I had already established a relationship with in person. But I would say, like, for the most part, they've gone pretty well. The ones where I've had to establish a whole new rapport with the kids, that could be a little bit more difficult from kid to kid. But again, you know, that can be a problem in person too.
Right. So kind of the bottom line is it works well. There are actually advantages. It's not, you know, we're not in the midst of this disadvantaged situation now that we've gone to remote services. So there are even some advantages to those. But the long and short of it is it does involve more parent involvement and parent coaching.
Yeah.
They need to be side by side with their child to make the session, the remote session, go as smoothly as possible.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, they're also going to be the ones now and, before too, that's with the child all day. So, I try, that's the fact that you're also engaging with me and learning from me. And then you can really take that, what we're working on, and really stretch that out over the whole week. That's huge. That's way, way more important than the 30 minutes that I have here is the other 12 hours that you have with the kid, just just a comparison of the sheer volume, the amount of time that you have, so absolutely the parent coaching is
valuable, very valuable for
that?
I said I can just see where this can be extremely valuable for the parents to gain some insight into some things that they just may not have been aware of before.
Right. And a lot of these things, I think the parents kind of instinctively do. But like I was mentioning before, I try to put a finer point on it and pick out the things that you're already doing that are awesome and do that more, so that's another thing. It's like I was saying before, there's something magical about any of the stuff that I do. But I want to filter out all the stuff all the ways that you're interacting with the kid to this many things, and then just really be able to reinforce and repeat those things over and over and over, because obviously the more that the kid is hearing the same kinds of words and phrases in the same kinds of context, the more it's going to sink in.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll wrap up, except for I just wanted to give you just a couple of minutes to tell me this is atypical, I'm using the words typical, but what would a typical 30-minute, 45-minute session with a 2 to 3-year-old look like in a remote setting? So just kind of give a broad, just kind of give me the rundown of how you would structure that. So a parent kind of have some.
So just some quick overview. Basically, there's two types of activities that I'm doing. One is where I just want you to listen, and the other one is where you have to talk. And so those are each activity has kind of both components. That's one sort of variable that I'm thinking about. Another variable, and you might not think about this because this is very specific to what I do, but the size of the screen. So right now I'm on full size, right? You just see my face. And then if I want to pull up a PDF or something else, then I'm going to shrink to a corner of the screen, and it's going to be mostly about what's the book. So I try to be cognizant of that too, because older kids, that's not as big of a deal. With younger kids, I think it's a bigger deal in terms of holding their attention or kind of establishing a social rapport. So I like to start the session like this in full screen, so you can see me, I can see you. We're talking, we're getting warmed up. There's a couple of activities that are more conducive to this kind of setup. So one of the ones I like to do is with the flashcards. So show the card, do some acting, so not only am I teaching the word here, but I'm also teaching words like I'm eating, or eat apple, or it's a yummy apple, or a red apple. So this is kind of my prop, and then I'm circling the words around it that are sort of associated with apple, right? So you eat apples, you like apples, stuff like that. So that's one thing that I think works really well. Another thing that works really well is the baby again. So again, which one do you want? Oh, look, what's the baby doing? The baby is eating. The baby eat, or eat apple. So that's the first thing I try to do, is a full screen activity like that. And then I move to doing books. So, when I do that, 3/4 of the screen is going to be the book, and I have a little marker, and I can, either read to them, or we can kind of just discuss a little bit, what's going on in the pictures. So that's generally the bulk of the session, is I try to do stuff with books and discuss the pictures and stuff like that. Like I was mentioning in this forum online, I have to be a lot more cognizant of the child's attention. It's 2-dimensional instead of 3-dimensional, right? So I try to, as I'm doing the books, I try to give the kid a voice in terms of if you want to move on to the next book, you're finished with this one, you want to read more of this one, give them a little bit of sense of control, some sense of agency, because I find that helps with their attention. So that's the second thing that I usually do is a picture book PDF type of activity. And then usually I'll switch back to full screen, and then we can just, either kind of run through the things that we have already done, or if if I want as a reward activity, we can do a little song or a video. And with that, I like to just specifically say that I don't think that is beneficial just to show the whole video and be like, all right, that's it, see you later. That to me is like babysitting. No offense to babysitters, but that's more like therapy. So, in a video, I will cut it after like 20 seconds. And depending on where the kid's language level is, I'll have them ask for more, or, we could talk about something that just happened in the video or something that's kind of on the screen. And then, we'll go for another 20 seconds. We'll sing another verse of The Wheels on the Bus. And then kind of, once we're finished with that, we'll go back to full screen. We'll say our salutations. See you next time. Great job. Clap, clap, clap. And then we go on. So that's the basic overview. I mean, obviously within that, there's a lot of specific stuff that really pertains to the specific child and their abilities and their interests. If a kid likes, I don't know, Peppa Pig more than they like whatever else kids like, then we'll probably do that instead of the other thing. So I try to give myself enough kind of flexibility in terms of the language targets that I'm going at, and enough flexibility in terms of what the kids' interests are, and enough flexibility in terms of where they're at on that day, because we're all like this. Adults are like this too, but it's really, really more noticeable in a 2 or 3 year old when they're having a bad day, because they don't know that, you're supposed to kind of keep those feelings inside, right?
They're out there in the world.
Right. They haven't learned that you have to put the mask on and just, do the work. That's, maybe a 6 year old, you can get away with a little bit more of that. But, I kind of have to, whether I'm in person or I'm online, I have to meet them where they're at on that day. And so, like I said, I try to give myself some built-in kind of flexibility with moving from one thing to the other more quickly, or if they're more attentive, like holding this activity out a little bit longer, stuff like that. That's kind of, a therapist, all these activities on their own are something that everybody can do, but sort of juggling them like this is kind of where the professionalism of the therapist is tested a little bit more so.
Well, and I think I've said this to every person that I've interviewed, is the creativity that you are as professionals being asked to tap into. I'm so extremely impressed. I've learned so much in talking with all of the different therapists and learning specialists and getting all the different ideas that you have. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we're doing this. This isn't just for parents. There are a lot of overwhelmed professionals out there trying to get into this as well. And so being able to see some tips and tricks from you, and, I didn't think about that. And it's so incredibly beneficial. And I have just thoroughly enjoyed talking to you and to all of the professionals, because I think, we're the whole coin phrase, we're all in this together. And, at the end of the day, the goal is that we have children who have needs, and they need to continue to receive the help that they can get as much to our ability as we can provide it. And, this for technology, where would we have been, 25 years ago if something like this would have happened? So, there are a lot of benefits to the technology, and we just have to figure out how to tap into it and help these kids. And so.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for all of us, this is a new medium. It's not, well, I don't want to say for all of us, for most of us, this is a new medium. I guess there was therapists before COVID, that were doing teletherapy for children that are not in the most accessible areas. So maybe for them, it's an older thing, but we're both sides, the families and as well as the therapists, we're both kind of learning right now, and so it's really nice to be able to talk about some of the pitfalls and some of the benefits. There's no perfect system. In person's not perfect, online's not perfect either. They both kind of have their ups and their downs. Right.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Theo. Anything else?
All right, Nicole.
I
think that's about it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, and carry on. Talk soon.
All right. Take care. Talk soon. Take care.